through the lot, now you know I'm coming through. When the growth look good on you, best believe they wanna screw now. I've been trying to climb, devil threw me in the dark. Baby, don't be insecure, you can still go make a mark like blow. Could never let them drain my soul now. Blow. Tables turning like doorknobs, wow. Blow. I think I'm about to set sail. I'm a walking, living legend, walking with my chest out. Life keep dealing me cards, I keep feeling it.
What's going on, people? What is going on? It's G back in the building. Guys, please make sure you smash that like button. Please make sure you subscribe to the channel if you are new, as it is scrolled across the bottom. We're back here with another Scout Watch, and obviously you guys can see on the screen we're going to be talking today about Romeo Lavia. Now, the Southampton player signed from Manchester City last summer. Youth products, played for the youth teams for Manchester City, Belgian or youth international. Good player, very, very good player. Plays in that defensive midfield position, can play central midfield as well. Obviously has been relegated with Southampton. So again, there's been a lot, and I do mean a lot, of talk about him. Should certain teams sign him? We know Manchester City do have a buyback clause for him, but that does not come into effect until 2024. So obviously next year. So at this current moment in time, I do believe though that they can actually match any bid from a club. So if a club bids, 50 million, for example, Manchester City can actually match that bid. And obviously if it gets accepted, then theirs will be accepted too. That is my understanding of that. But obviously we're just here to talk a little bit about him. What is he like? Is he good enough? Liverpool have been linked with the midfielder. Apparently is one of Liverpool's targets this summer. Posted up by Dave O.C. Kopp. The Times have reported that Liverpool are interested in Lavia. Man City obviously have the clause that they can match any side's bid, but interestingly, the Times report that Manchester City will look elsewhere. So first of all, that kit does look a little bit all right, but very, very good player. I think what he's shown this season, especially moving from Manchester City, it's going to be difficult at the end of the day, but clearly Southampton, they were going through, in last summer, they were going through a period of time where they were just signing, a lot of young players, that they were signing who potentially could be decent, could turn out to be, fantastic players. But I think coupled with obviously, managerial decisions and stuff like that on the pitch, I felt like their team was just a little bit too inexperienced and they didn't really have enough quality in order for them to stay up. And unfortunately, they've gone down. So there are a few players from Southampton who might potentially be on the move. Clubs are looking at James Ward-Prowse obviously being probably the main one, but Lavia is a close second. Now, Lavia, what are we saying, in regards to him? He currently played 80 games as a defensive midfielder. That's for Southampton and Manchester City youth teams, and obviously played 8 games as a central midfielder. So obviously the question that I put up, you can see on the thumbnail in itself is Lavia the 6 that we need? Is he the one that we should go out for? Is he the player that can potentially help take Liverpool to that next level, whatever that next level is? Can he do that? Will he help towards that? Does he come in and he's a squad option, which I think would be if you're able to get a really, really good defensive midfielder and then you had Lavia as well, I think that would be brilliant. Or does he come in and is he going to immediately be someone that we're looking to and saying, okay, you know what, he's got to come in and hit the ground running? That's where it becomes a little bit difficult because he's only young. Do you know what I mean? He's only young. So to expect him to be, would I say, of a certain level so quickly as well, it might be tricky. I don't feel like he's at that level anyway, to be honest with you. I think he'd be a very good squad rotation option for a Liverpool, for example. But at the same time, I've then got to think, I'm comparing him to the players that we've currently got there. And this is where it's a 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. I've spoken, if you watched my video yesterday, speaking about Liverpool and the improvements, it's, I don't see, unless something obviously changes in the summer window, I don't see like a Fabinho leaving. Obviously, you still got Bajcetic, you still got Tyler Morton. Who knows what Klopp's going to do with those players? if they do stay, okay, if they stay, and you're going to get a Lavia in to then come in, we know we need to bring the age of the squad down, but then it's like, ooh, you've got quite a lot of youngsters. Unless you rotate, and again, like I referenced in the video, if Klopp isn't going to rotate that much, is Lavia just going to come there and play every now and again? Because I can see Fabinho starting next season, to be honest with you. Unless he obviously goes through, where it differs for me is going to be this season. Obviously, Fabinho was obviously poor throughout the whole season, but he had a period where he was really, really bad, but we weren't really playing anybody else there. And I guess we didn't really have anyone else there until he decided to actually play Bajcetic, which again, I find weird, because it's like, if you're going to try these players anyway, why didn't you try them a lot sooner? Just to also as well, sometimes I think, take the player out the bloody firing line, because it's all well and good, cool. Sometimes with players, they can play themselves back into form, and if you generally don't have anybody that you think is good enough, then you're just going to keep playing that player, i.e. right wing, for example. There's no one else at this football club who I would be comfortable with playing right wing. So, of course, Salah then has to just keep playing. You can say, yeah, Elliott, Ben Doak, obviously he's still young. Don't really know what he's going to be like, in the future. So it then becomes tricky. And as I mentioned, if Klopp doesn't rotate, it creates a problem, because then you just got players who are just sitting there. And it's difficult. As we saw with Keller on the last game of the season, you're rusty. You don't look comfortable, and then you need to be played into some level of form, as we saw with Curtis Jones. Finally actually gave him some games, and you're seeing a different player to the player that that we were seeing previously. And I think hopefully, if we were to sign a Lavia, which I'm not opposed to, if we were to sign someone like him, then he's going to need to get games, and he's going to need to get games very quickly, because he's going to need to be acclimatized to the way that Jurgen Klopp obviously wants Liverpool to play. When we look in here, obviously at his stats this season, he's played 34 games in all, 1 goal, 1 assist, 28 games obviously in the Premier League. Pretty decent, well, more than decent, to be honest with you. 34 games under your belt in your kind of breakout season is really, really good. And if we're looking here, obviously at his stats here, there's a few of them that I've obviously just highlighted. His pass completion, he ranks in the 79th percentile, 86.2%, per 90. Successful take-ons, he ranks in the 77th percentile, 1.17 per game. Tackles, 69th percentile, pretty good, especially for someone who's young. 2.38 tackles a game. And then obviously interceptions at 73 percentile, and then blocks at 95. So again, looking at that, I'm thinking, what? Those are good statistics, from a player, regardless of who he is. If you just saw that and said, okay, this guy's a defensive midfielder, straight off the rip, you're thinking, all right, I could potentially deal with that. And then when you factor in his age, his inexperience, obviously at this level, the fact that so many teams want Lavia kind of speaks volumes. I think I remember at the beginning of the season, he had just signed for Southampton, and then there was talks that Chelsea actually wanted to sign him straight away, and that kind of told. And I think that's where a lot of people then stood up and was like, okay, who's this guy? Yeah, if you support Manchester City, they will tell you about Lavia. They'll be able to tell you a lot better than I could about how good he actually was, in the youth system. And I've watched him a little bit, highlights and stuff like that, and I thought, yeah, he looks okay. He looks decent. But youth football and Premier League level are completely different things. So it's difficult to then see how they can translate it, up to this level. And then watching him for Southampton at the early part of the season, I thought, okay, again, without putting too much pressure on him, it was just more of a case of, he does look good. Do you know what I mean? He looks all right. He looks neat and tidy, is what I used to always say about him. He looks like a neat and tidy player. But of course, you're playing for Southampton, one of the bottom teams obviously got relegated. And then you're also thinking to yourself, okay, how is he going to do under pressure? And what I mean by that is not necessarily in game pressure, just in terms of when Southampton are not doing well. How does he still look? Do you know what I mean? Can his qualities and his attributes, can they still shine through even when Southampton inevitably are going through any bad patches and all of these kind of things? And I think he shone through. He was one of their better performers this season, again alongside James Ward-Prowse. And I think those two in the middle, when you look at some of the systems that Southampton played, James Ward-Prowse and Lavia, playing as the two central midfielders, I think those two were pretty decent. Do you know what I mean? They were pretty decent this season. And, they, unfortunately for them, they happen to be a part of a relegation team, but, not for the want of trying, especially from James Ward-Prowse. But again, he's the more experienced one. So, and he's the captain. So I do kind of expect it. Again, here in the 4-2-3-1 formation, Lavia, sitting a bit deeper in these kind of games where they've got obviously the 4 attacking players, but then they've got, I would say Lavia would probably be, I guess, you know what, he kind of swaps a little bit with a James Ward-Prowse when it does come to, in these games. Sometimes he's the deeper one, sometimes Ward-Prowse is, but Ward-Prowse is the one that you're probably looking to try and get you the goals from midfield, because of his long range shooting. Lavia was kind of the one that they would probably use as a, he's the I don't want to say it, but like he's the cleaner. He's almost the cleaner, to sweep things up. Do you know what I mean? And that's not a bad thing at all, because he also has very good technical ability. And obviously, you see here in a 5-3-2 formation, again, Lavia at the center of that. So first of all, the fact that Southampton are playing so many different types of formations, again, testament to them in the sense of just trying to see what works, how it can work. But the fact that he's able to play in all of these different formations, I think that's really good as well. Shows a bit of versatility in the sense of understanding different tactical setups for different games and things like that. Looking over towards his heat map this season, you can see mostly in those central areas, and also quite importantly, left and right as well. They're quite even, if I'm being totally honest with you. Maybe you might say, we could probably say the left-hand side potentially was an area that he would be in maybe the most, but again, you look at the center of the park and then you look at the right-hand side. So again, it's that level of versatility that I do like when I look at a player and look to see, are they a player that could potentially fit, in this team? And we all know what it's like under Jurgen Klopp. He likes that versatility. He really, really does like that versatility, within his squad. Looking at any injuries, this is posted up by Transfer Market. Again, he might have had other injuries. So again, don't take what I'm saying as gospel. Check it out for yourselves. Southampton fans will be able to tell you a lot better than I could. But the only one they've got recorded here was a hamstring injury that he sustained, and he was out for 8 games. He probably maybe had some other injuries, but that might have coincided with like the international break and things like that. So again, looking at that, and I'm thinking, I mean, it's your first season and you got 8 and you missed 8 games due to a hamstring injury. So, I mean, I can only, relative to that, I'm thinking that it's okay. Do you know what I mean? Hopefully that's not like anything that's reoccurring, because we already done know about the injury issues that, Liverpool have had in the last 2-3 years, to be honest with you, ever since that season where we had all the centre backs out. You can kind of see, all right, well, we're having issues with our injury department. We don't want to pick up a player who's going to be constantly injured. Hamstring injury. Okay, fair enough. But again, let's just look at the player themselves, and hopefully this is just a one-off. I'm not saying he's never going to get injured again, but just in terms of his durability, because that's going to be a major sticking point, for Liverpool as to whether or not they feel they should sign him. Looking at the kind of player, that he is, a holding midfielder by trade. He's known for his progressive passes, that he works in the final third of the pitch. The Belgian is obviously comfortable with both feet, and his close control in tight areas are one of many skills that he possesses and makes good use of. So again, having that technical ability, is that something that we need, in the midfield? Is that something that we require in that midfield? At the moment, obviously, we've got Fabinho. I wouldn't say he's technically sound. He's okay. He's not the worst one I've seen, but maybe we're looking for a different type of midfielder, if I'm being totally honest with you. Lavia has many traits, but one that stands out is his tenacity. Really, really good. Having played for Manchester City's academy team, he knows a thing or two about keeping and passing the ball in quick and efficient way. He is everywhere in the midfield. Again, looking at that, I've mentioned before about Liverpool and the way that they play in a general sense. It's very, very slow. It's not really a quick build-up. I'll be super honest with you. Even just looking at that for a second, I'll be honest with you. He sounds like a player that would actually suit Brighton. So don't even be surprised. There hasn't been any reports, by the way. So, I'm not saying that he signs there, but don't be surprised if if he goes to a Brighton. And I think that would be a good deal for him. Obviously I'm a Liverpool fan, and I would like to see him here. I just want to put that on record. I would like to see him at Liverpool, because I do think he is a good player. But sometimes it's about and I mentioned in my video, it's about getting the right profile of player for whatever it is you want to do. So again, you've got Fabinho there. Klopp might be either looking for an exact copy of a Fabinho, just a bit better or younger or whatever, or he's looking for something completely different. And where I look at Lavia, yes, he's got the tenacity, obviously playing for Manchester City, as it said there, but he's more the technical, deep line playmaker. Whereas I looked at Fabinho as more of the anchor man, ball-winning midfielder type of guy. You know what I mean? Yes, he can pick out a pass every now and again, not to say he couldn't, but I look at Lavia and I look at Fabinho and I think, who's more, in my eyes anyway, from what I've seen, who's more technically sound, who looks more comfortable on the ball? And I feel like Lavia looks more comfortable. Statistics might obviously tell you different and things like that. Lavia now is an intelligent player, analyzes opponents' movements on the pitch. His reading of the game is way ahead of his age group of players he plays with. The discipline he shows on the ball is second to none, with very few players showing the calmness and ability to intercept crucial passes at crucial times. Again, like I said, he is more of that type of player where I'm not saying he seems like he could easily do, if you needed a ball winner and you were playing and you wanted to play that kind of way, he could probably do it. But I don't feel like that is where his areas of expertise are going to excel. I feel like he's someone who would probably be a lot more comfortable in that deep line next to another player. But then we've got Trent Alexander-Arnold, who I wouldn't call a ball-winning midfielder. So can you have two deep line playmakers kind of thing? Maybe not. Maybe he's just going to be the cleaner. Like I said, the sweeper, someone who he can intercept passes really well. And then he pops it off to the other players. But then you also know in these kind of tight situations, he's still comfortable enough on the ball to be able to pick out a pass and not remain, and not be rushed into any decisions that may or may not harm, the team. Looking here, obviously him picking up the ball. This is playing for Manchester City. I believe this was last season. I think, I can't remember what cup game this was. But him obviously picking up the ball, as I said, he's got a range of passes. Now, obviously, this is Manchester City, so this is a bit different because the way that Manchester City plays is different to the way that everybody else plays. And they always seem to have time on the ball. So when you've got time on the ball, any good player, any player who could potentially pick that out, they're going to pick it out at the end of the day. Look, you can see on the right-hand side, that player's got years of space. Do you know what I mean? So I don't even feel like Fabinho would be able to pick out a pass like that. That's not to discredit Lavia, but it's just like, cool. But he's got the passes, in his locker kind of thing. And then when you're looking at stuff like this, being able to intercept, pick up, then pick up the pass, he's got these little things in his locker. He's got these little things, in his locker, positionally aware. He's someone who is quite, like it says there, he's intelligent, he's smart on the pitch. And it's like, I'm not going to say he plays well beyond his years. I feel like that will be maybe going a couple steps too far. But I do look at him and just think to myself, if you did get someone like him in, and now we're looking at Liverpool, and again, we're not the only club who are linked with him. We're not the only club who are interested in him. There's quite a few other teams. But when I'm looking at for Liverpool, I'm just thinking, I just look at him and I think, wouldn't that be such, like, if Fabinho wasn't acting like the Fabinho that we've just seen, this season, wouldn't that be such a class kind of player to have on the bench? Now, straight away, people are probably thinking, but what about Bajcetic? What about Tyler Morton? But we'll talk about Bajcetic. Now, Bajcetic, I think this is where it becomes tricky. And this is where I think Klopp might look at it and think, do I even need to really sign someone like him when I've got a Bajcetic? Because I do feel like they are relatively similar, but I feel like Bajcetic can get down and dirty a lot better than a Lavia, so to speak, just from watching Bajcetic this season. Maybe that was just because of how our midfield was. So maybe my judgment is just being a little bit clouded. But when I look at the two players, I'm just like, I would prefer to have Lavia in the 6 because I feel like he can hold the 6 by himself, and he's actually shown that. When Bajcetic has played in the 6, I'm not saying that he necessarily couldn't play there, but I don't really see a long-term position for him there. I feel like he's more comfortable in almost that 8 position because of how good like Bajcetic is actually on the ball, and he is a bit of a runner. Again, not to discredit, because I know people always think, when you say a good thing about someone, they always think you're talking negatively about someone else. I'm not doing that, because I think that I like Lavia a lot, and I think he's better than Bajcetic. He's more experienced, and he seems like the more mature player, so to speak, in terms of just size, stature, and just the way that he plays. Bajcetic, I feel, still needs to do a bit more growing, so to speak, but he's still relatively new. When I look at the two players, I just think there's a calmness about Lavia that will always inevitably help you, especially when you're in these kind of top teams. Not to say that you couldn't have a Bajcetic as well, but more maybe he's going to be a bit further down that kind of pecking order. When I look at Bajcetic, I just always think to myself, yeah, he's tidy on the ball. Do you know what I mean? He can pick up a pass, so to speak. He is relatively tidy on the ball, but I feel like he's more of an engine. That's why I wouldn't necessarily have him in that 6th position long term. I feel like watching him in that 8th position, I was like, well, straight away, you just look a lot more. You look like you're utilizing your attributes a lot better than you were in that 6th position. Right now, anyway, again, this is just for right now. I don't really feel like you could play in that 6 by yourself if we necessarily needed to. Maybe if you got the double pivot, blah, 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 maybe, yeah, then that could potentially work. But when he's by himself, I just wasn't really feeling that. And I was a lot happier seeing him in that 8th position because I was starting to see what else he could do first and foremost. But then also, he just looked a little bit more comfortable. So, it's kind of like a 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Hence the reason why I just think with the way that Jurgen Klopp is and the way that he likes to kind of move with certain players, I don't know if that's going to be a signing that we actually make, because then he's going to need to start making contingency plans for other players. And I don't know if we've got the facilities to be able to do that, this summer. But, again, it's a story that, as Dave put here, he is according to the Times anyway, he is a player that we're apparently looking at. So, don't be surprised if we do sign him. I don't know where he would fit, in the team. A lot of people have said, oh, yeah, we signed Lavia, he's got to come straight into the team, blah, blah, blah. I just, knowing Jurgen Klopp, I just don't see it. I just see a situation of, if he's going to go with this whole 3, Trent inverted, I think the back 3, depending on if he signs any centre backs, it will be a mixture of Van Dijk, Konate, and Robbo / whoever we sign on that left centre back. If we do, Trent in the middle with Fabinho, and then it's the 4. It's really the 2 attacking, well, the 2 number 8 positions that I'm more looking at to then say, okay, yeah, we might. Obviously, if we sign McAllister, we might then obviously have different players in there. But in terms of starting the season, first game, I feel like Fabinho might be someone he's going to look to because he knows the system, and you got to think of it like that. He knows the system. He knows how Klopp wants to play. It'll be easier to start off with a Fabinho and then drip feed someone like a Lavia into the team. But if Lavia then picks up good form, he's good enough to potentially stay in the team. But we'll wait and see, man. We'll wait and see what happens, obviously, with that. But guys, that is obviously the end of the video. Taking a look at Romeo Lavia. Do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Do you think he's a player we should sign? If we do sign him, what kind of squad role do you think he has for next season? If you don't think Liverpool sign him, guys, like, where else do you think he could do well? It might not just be Liverpool. Do you know what I mean? So it's all about the betterment of the player, to be honest with you. And he's going to have a lot of suitors, so it's going to be interesting to see, where he goes. But guys, make sure you smash a like, make sure you share, make sure you subscribe to GTV. I'm G, Scout Watch, done and dusted. I am out.